Countdown to Halloween, featuring Gregory Miller's Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. Every night at exactly midnight, a new story will appear on StoryLink Radio's YouTube channel. You'll have 24 hours to listen, then it will disappear and the next one will appear. Plan to catch these each day or you'll miss one. Each story will be 2 to 13 minutes long. If you haven't already, be sure to listen to the introduction to the book right here on this channel. And now, tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales. October 8th, The Rendezvous. It was evening, and William and Francine were 17. And he was going away and she was staying behind. The present had moved them into the future, and the future was now. They stood beneath the trees at the top of the hill, leaves falling on and around them as the wind blew. Far below, the lights of the small town twinkled cold and distant. Whatever warmth they promised, chilled by the encroaching dark and the thick of autumn. William looked at Francine. In the glow of the lantern, she appeared pale and tired, almost fragile. He knew the symptoms for what they were, the recognition of a forthcoming loss. It won't be forever. This is a short break, a hurdle we have to jump before the finish line, and once we cross it...
We won't cross it,
replied Francine.
You'll be overseas for 5 years, and I'll be here waiting, and then not waiting anymore.
I don't say that. 5 years isn't so long.
It's more than a lifetime.
He stared at her in silence, frustrated and lost.
I put this off until the last minute because, well, I wanted you to enjoy these final weeks. But you must understand what this means.
William shook his head, not knowing what else to do or say.
You have lived here for 8 months,
Francine continued. She took his hand in her quite cold one.
Long enough for us to fall in love, not long enough for you to set down any other ties. And now you're going to college, and this town and I will become a sweet memory that becomes fainter with every passing year. And in 10 years, maybe 20, all I'll be is a hazy, bittersweet emotion you feel every time you pass a maple tree at sunset, stand atop a wild hill.
No, William said firmly. In 5 years, I'm going to take you away, and we can be together forever. I'll come back. You just have to be patient.
Oh, I will be patient,
Francine said, equally resolved.
But you won't come back.
William felt tears prick his eyes. Ashamed, he lowered his head, fished in his coat pocket, and pulled out a red velvet box. Francine took it with a trembling hand and opened it.
Oh, beautiful,
she said, and withdrew a silver heart-shaped locket.
Just beautiful.
She fastened the locket's chain around her neck, stepped back so he could admire it, and smiled. She looked radiant in the shifting, flickering glow of the lantern, and the silver heart reflected white light like ice. I want you to keep it with you always, he said softly, and when I come back I'll replace it with one of gold. Francine bit her lip, closed her eyes, and took a deep breath. And then slowly, with great effort, she steadied herself, opened her eyes again, and managed a thin smile.
And now I have a gift for you.
Oh, no, you can't afford...
It doesn't cost anything, but it's all I can give. Your gift, William, is this. 20 years from now, if you're still alone in the world, come back to this hill at dusk. 20 years exactly, on October 8th, 1921. And I will meet you here.
William sighed. I told you I'll come back in 5, and that I won't change my mind. Nothing can keep me from you. Not college, not time, nothing. You'll see. What we have now will last forever. She nodded, bit her lip a second time, then repeated.
October 8th, 1921.
Before he could object again, she leaned forward, kissed him, and he spoke no more. It was evening, and William was 37. Annie had returned. The hill seemed less high, the town diminished, but the old maples still rustled in the autumn wind, and dusk, still abrupt and aggressive the way only a small town dusk can be, encroached forcefully despite the electric lamps in the streets below, and felt cold on his neck and hands. 20 years had passed in a blink, time flowing like a river toward a destination he could never have foreseen. How pathetic, he reflected bitterly, that once he had thought he could predict its path. She'll have forgotten, he said softly, not liking the broken sound of his own voice. Never the same after the painful events of the previous few years. She'll be married now, have children, probably a cozy cottage on the other end of town, and I'll feel like a lost fool all over again. He sat down on a familiar stump and brushed an orange leaf from his shoulder. Life is strange, he thought. Fickle. All accomplishments tenuous, all positions untenable, and human nature so weak. All I can trust is myself. Not even that, in fact. For over a year he had written to Francine, first twice a week, then once a week, then once every 2 weeks, then once a month. So busy, he thought at the time. She'll understand. She had not written back, of course, because she wasn't good at letter writing, and she'd warned him not to expect it. Her lack of education had always embarrassed her, so she had avoided pen and paper. And then, so gradually he barely noticed, his letters became even more infrequent, and finally stopped altogether. It was difficult writing the silence, and even more difficult when a new woman, educated, passionate, driven, and right in front of him, began to engage his thoughts and whatever free time he had left. Then graduation, marriage, his practice, the affair with his partner's wife, the divorce, the lawsuit, the bankruptcy. All pieces of a puzzle that, once it came together over months and years, looked as dark and chaotic as a storm-tossed sea. And none of those pieces had included Francine. She had slipped into his past just as she had predicted. And he hadn't minded until everything else he thought he loved had been taken away. This was a mistake, he said clearly, tapping his foot. This was a terrible mistake. She would never come. He no longer deserved her, nor a promise kept. And then, shoe in mid-tap, William paused. His foot had come down on something hard and flat. Curious, he knelt down on one knee, flipped open his lighter, and pushed aside some leaves. The tombstone, a long slab, read simply, Francine Myra Gertz, 1884-1901. Consumption claimed our angel. Always in our hearts. The lighter slipped then from William's nerveless hand to clatter shut on the stone, darkness instantly filling the space in its glow. He remembered Francine's pale face, cold hands, and the ennui he thought had been stress, but had apparently been something far, far worse. And he realized all in an instant that Francine had known. No, he breathed. It's not possible. I won't believe it. I can't. Yes, he thought. You must believe it. She knew, and here we are, together again. Shaking his head, William got to his feet and brushed himself off. A shiver snaked through him as he realized just how isolated he was, standing on a deserted hill above a town he now barely knew. All those years ago, why had she wanted him to come back now? To buffer the pain of the loss with time? Of course. Doubtless Francine had not wanted to anchor him here by telling him she was ill, or to throw his formative years off course with news of her death. So selfless, so loving. Yet now, 20 years later, he was standing by a grave at the spot of his most bittersweet memory, more alone now than ever before. Over the years, especially during the recent dark days, it had comforted him somehow to know Francine was living her life, hopefully happy, her beauty still gracing this town still home to her beauty. Now even that had been taken away. The desolation was devastating. In the darkness, he reached into his pocket and pulled out a black satin jewelry box. Tears building in his eyes, he opened it, removed an exquisite gold locket, and laid it gently on the grave.
"Oh, God,"
William said.
"Francine, I'm here. I kept my promise. Oh, but how I wish you would."
He stopped. Something had silenced him. A thin metallic chime. He reached back down, fumbling for the dropped lighter. Suddenly all the shadows around him seemed to shift, to hover, to scrabble and bend. He found the lighter, gripped it tight, knocked back the top, flicked it on, and looked down. A silver locket and chain, very familiar, lay in the center of the slab, reflecting moonlight in a white, shining glimmer. The gold locket was gone.
"No,"
he said. "No, that's not possible. It's not possible. It's not—" A foul wind, a breath, blew in from the surrounding shadows, struck him, and snuffed out the flame. The night encroached once more, seething around him like all the ruinous memories time had allowed him to keep. And perhaps, just perhaps, like one memory more than all the others, a jilted memory that did not want to die. And now a new idea occurred to him that, given life, refused to go away. Francine had known she was dying, yes, but had still wanted him here now. Only not to give him closure. With a tremulous hand, William flicked the lighter once, twice, 3 times until the shaking light steadied. He breathed in, out, in, then held the flame high. His screams woke half the town, but no one ever learned whose they were. You've just heard tonight's story from Dark Nights and Candlelight, 31 Tiny October Tales from author Gregory Miller. You can get this book right now on Amazon at the on-screen link, and Kindle Unlimited users can borrow a copy of the book for free. You can learn more about Gregory Miller and his many amazing books and projects at his website, On Screen. If you have not already, be sure to listen to our event video here and visit our event website to learn all about our upcoming events. Remember to come back after midnight for our next tale. Oh, and don't forget to hit the subscribe button for StoryLink Radio.